Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, dedicated to localization of Dynamics 365 Finance for LATAM countries. Today, we will provide you with an update on the progress of implementation of LATAM localizations and recently released countries. My name is Evgeny Popov, and I will be your presenter today. I'm a product manager on the Dynamics 365 Finance team, and my main focus is around globalization in general and localization expansion specifically. My co-presenters today are Cintia Picon and Andrey Kviklis, who are also product managers on the finance team. Okay, our agenda today includes the following points. We will briefly cover the progress of our country expansion project and the roadmap. We will touch on the core functionality available to all LATAM countries in Dynamics 365 Finance. Then we will provide an overview of the features available to the countries released just recently. We also provide an update on the electronic invoicing coverage for LATAM countries. And at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A segment. We'll be able to respond to your questions in live. All right, just a brief overview of our country expansion efforts and the status of the release as of the release 10.0.44, so the current release. Currently, Dynamics 365 Finance includes out-of-the-box localizations for 57 countries or regions, with 13 countries added for the LATAM region in the recent couple of years. You can see the overall status for LATAM countries in the middle of the slide. We released the core LATAM functionality and localizations for the first 4 countries in November 2023, with 4 more countries following in September 2024. 2 countries were added in March 2025, and 3 more countries are added in the release 10.0.44, which will be generally available in early June this year, so basically in the next few days. We have 1 more country in our roadmap for the LATAM region, which is Argentina. It's currently planned for the 2026 release wave 1, so basically next calendar year. And also in parallel, we are working on localization for Turkey as part of our country expansion project overall globally. And this localization is also made available for public preview in the release 10.0.44. And we plan to make it generally available in the second release wave for the year 2025, so later this calendar year. Let's dig into LATAM functionalities. Before we started our country expansion project for LATAM, we were providing out-of-box localizations only for Brazil and Mexico in the region. And with our current country expansion project, we are adding 14 more countries. It's important to note that a big part of the localization for these 14 new countries is a so-called cross-LATAM functionality. These features and capabilities are available to all 14 countries and work more or less the same way for all countries, with minor country-specific variations. Additionally, there are country-specific features in some areas, so features that are available to only some of the countries in the region. We provide cross-LATAM features in tax determination and calculation, like features in tax setup and master data, and features for withholding taxes. And there are cross-LATAM features in invoicing, such as document classification and invoice processing. And we also offer some common electronic invoicing capabilities for LATAM. Then we provide common features in tax and audit reporting, banking and payments, and other areas. And features that are available to individual countries in the region include country-specific invoice and other document layouts, country-specific electronic invoice formats, and country-specific tax and audit reporting, as you can see here on this slide. And all these features, both cross-LATAM features and country-specific features, they leverage our configurable tools and services that are part of the globalization studio in Dynamics 365 Finance. So All the reports are based on the electronic reporting framework, and we heavily use the electronic invoicing service for electronic invoicing capabilities and integrations. You can find the full list of features and capabilities available across LATAM and to individual countries in our public documentation. And also, I'd like to remind you that this is the second session in our series of TechTalk sessions dedicated to LATAM localizations. So you can find there like a more comprehensive, more full overview of the cross-LATAM functionality in the recording of the first session in the series. So I'm referring you to the first session for more information on cross-LATAM functionalities. And with this, I'm giving the floor to Cintia, who will continue the overview of the cross-LATAM functionalities and features available to recently released countries.
Hello, everyone. Let me introduce you to how to work with LATAM localization. To start, we are going to enable the localization. We need to go to Feature Management menu and search for Globalization Expansion and Globalization Expansion for the country when you are to start using the localization. Remember to enable both options in this menu. Then make sure that the legal entity is configured for the country where the feature were enabled. Some functionality, especially report, are configured to work only with the country that you enabled before. In Organization Administration menu, you will find the main form to configure different functionalities. Here, LATAM section, you will find different forms to configure all cross-LATAM functionalities. You will find different configurations such as LATAM parameter, tax ID, taxpayer, as Evgeny mentioned before, the document class to configure invoice, credit, and debit note, internal document like payment order, and others. Then you have the possibility to configure the forms that you will use for accounting and tax reports. Here we have an example of the legal entity form. At the bottom of the page, you will find the LATAM extension. We complete the LATAM extension, in this case for Venezuela, with the appropriate information. Then we have the comparison between the tax ID type form. Yes, in this case, we have the possibility to check the configuration for the Colombian tax ID. This is the first one. Yes, we can see that we configure that tax ID with the format, and we check the verification algorithm. At the bottom of the page, we see the tax ID for the Dominican Republic. It has a different configuration, and there is no algorithm of verification required for this tax ID. So LATAM form will allow you to configure all the functionalities of LATAM. You will see the same fields in all the options, yes, but you need to check which configuration are needed for the specific requirements for the country. In this section, we will see the report release for the next countries. So it's important to remember that LATAM reports are based in electronic reporting functionality. In this list, we see all Colombian reports that are able to download it from Dataverse. Here we have an example of how the report file export 1001 looks like when you run it from the tax model. The downloaded file is an XML that contains transaction information such as supplier name and tax amounts. We also see an example of the number 31, which corresponds to a tax code established by the tax authority for the tax ID in Colombia. We are going to see some configuration to obtain this report. In the vendor configuration, at the bottom of the form, we find the LATAM extension. In this section, we can configure the characteristic for this vendor. One of the fields shows the country document type. When you go to the configuration of the country document type, you will have the possibility to configure in the tax application option the possibility to configure the code for this format. Then we have an example of the invoice journal. We can see the posted invoice, in this case, a purchase invoice. We have the LATAM extension. We can see the document class. We use factura in this option, and we can see the number of the invoice and the dates of the invoice. Once you download the report from Dataverse, go to electronic reporting, and in application-specific parameters, you can set the corresponding elements. In this case, the first lookup is configured with the document class used in the previous transaction. You may need to configure other lookups in this form, yes, such as the main group and the tax type. You can select the sales tax code used and the account for this report. All the Colombian reports works in a similar way that we saw before. This is a list of the reports available for Ecuador. In this case, we have the declaration report purchase detail. In this case, we can see another example of the vendor invoice journal. We notice that we select the document class, yes, configured for this purpose, for the purchase invoice, the numbers, and we select other information configured in the document class form, such as the field lists, as you can see in the screen, are formas de pago and identificación del sustento tributario. Those are classifications for this report. You can configure them in the document class form. Once the report is downloaded, in electronic reporting, go again to application-specific parameters and complete all the lookups and the configuration. In this case, we are seeing the tax type lookup, and the conditions selected are the appropriate for the sales tax use. Here we have an example of how the purchase detail report looks like when you run it from the tax module. Here we have a part of the report. The report has other columns at the right, but in this case, we are seeing some of them. Well, this is the list of Dominican Republic reports available for this country. We are going to see an example of the purchase of goods and service report. Yes, it's the report 606. We have another example of how we can post a transaction in the vendor invoice journal. In the same way, we have the LATAM extension and the document class and the number of the invoice. In this case, this invoice have a letter and the number. Also, we can complete the invoice with the information that is required for this report. This information can be configured in document class configuration. In additional data of the form, you can configure the appropriate field list for this report. Also, we have the possibility to see which sales tax code was used for this transaction. Again, when you download the report from the Dataverse, go to application-specific parameters and complete the lookups and the condition with all the possibility of document class usage and sales tax. Here we have another example of how the report looks like when you run it through the tax module. Yes, in this case, we have a TXT file. Here we have the list of the options of reports that we have in Peru. We are going to see how to configure the general ledger, the electronic book. Yes, for accounting report, we need to configure the SSR report service form. We see that option in administration and organization. Yes, it's one of the options of this menu. We have this form, and we need to configure with the selecting the model, the mapping, and the format, and check the appropriate option, in this case, general ledger. We also need, for this report, to configure parameters, selecting the tax application option. Here we have an example of the report, yes, how to the report looks like when you run it. In this case, we run accounting report through the general ledger module. Here we have the list of reports available for Venezuela. We are going to release them. We are going to see, for example, the VAT withholding reports. In this case, the same that we did before, we have the possibility to check a vendor invoice journal with the LATAM extension. We notice that we select the document class, the number of the invoice, and other information like dates and so on. In this case, when we go to the posting sales tax, we have VAT used for this transaction, and we also can see another tax with a negative tax. This is an example of how we could register transaction knowing in Spanish as abono en cuenta. In this case, we use it for scenarios when we need to register in our ERP the withholdings, the amount of the withholding when we receive the vendor invoice. You will find more information in the documentation of this report. Yes. Here we have the possibility to check once the report is downloaded from the Dataverse. Again, the application-specific parameters. In this case, the lookups. We select the document class uses in the transaction, and we have the possibility to check also the withholding. Yes, and select the sales tax code used for this transaction. This is an example of how the report looks like when you run it through the tax module. Here we have the list of reports available for Bolivia, and we have the report for Paraguay, Uruguay, and Guatemala. This one, we explain how to work with this kind of report in a previous TechTalk, so you can went to that video to see how to configure and use it, and in the documentation also. To summarize, enable the localization from feature management, selecting both globalization expansion and globalization expansion for the country. Configure all LATAM functionalities, all cross-LATAM functionality, document class, taxpayer, and others. Use LATAM extension to add information of purchase and sales transactions. When you work with accounting reports, you will need to download the report from Dataverse and configure the SSR report form and select the appropriate option for the report. And then to work with tax report, you will need to download it from Dataverse and remember to configure user-specific parameters, selecting sales tax code, document classes, and other lookups prepared for the reports. Finally, reports were prepared based on the specification published by the fiscal authorities, so it will be updated when the regulation changes. You can check when the new version will be released and published, reviewing in LSC.
Hello, everyone. Today, I want to give you an update on our electronic invoicing capabilities in our finance product. On this slide, I want to highlight, first of all, today that we provide basically two major capabilities about electronic invoicing. And first is what we call format-only approach. And this approach means that the data is being transformed into the country-specific formats required by one or another country. And the file is created and it is stored on a specified destination or location. And it doesn't involve submission and end-to-end flow. And this approach allows you to build your own integration in case Microsoft doesn't provide the end-to-end flow, or in some specific scenarios when you need a very customized or a bespoke integration. But the major approach, of course, is our electronic invoicing service, which provides the end-to-end flow, starting with the generation of format and further processing involving digital signature, submission to tax authority, or to authorize the service provider, receiving responses, processing, and this is regarding the outbound flow for sales invoices. And also we support for some countries inbound flow, which means import of vendor invoices. I want to show you our roadmap, which consists of the countries which we support and also which are in progress, and the rest are planned in our backlog. And we have already released formats for many countries, which will unblock you with the first approach. And also we ship it end-to-end scenario with integration for fewer countries, and these are Chile, Costa Rica, and Panama so far. And the next countries for the last mile connector with EDICOM will be Colombia, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Guatemala. And also it's important to notice here that when it comes to Brazil and Mexico, these countries were built many times ago in X++, and they do not use electronic invoicing service or electronic reporting formats. But currently we are working on the tax reform in Brazil, and in scope of this reform, we are moving a generation of the formats for this country into electronic reporting framework. And we do not move to electronic invoicing service at this stage. And for more information and to keep see the up-to-date information about our coverage, you can refer to the link below the table. On this slide, I combined information regarding the two countries we shipped since our previous TechTalk in June last year. And this is Panama and Costa Rica, both having pretty similar integration flow and only outbound flow for sales, and which comprises generation of electronic documents, submission them to EDICOM, and receiving the responses containing status and signed XML, and processing of the invoice status response to finally complete the pipeline. And in the table on the right, you can see the document types which we support for these countries. And these contain all the major types, like invoices, debit, credit notes, export invoices. And when it comes to Costa Rica, which we shipped in February this year, later we received an alert about the regulatory change, and kind of the new version is being introduced, as well as two new types of documents is being added to e-invoicing, and currently we are working on it, targeting for the 1st September. Yeah, but I mean the law enforcement date will be 1st of September, and we are going to ship it earlier. Yeah, of course. And for more information, you please refer to the links below the table regarding these countries. Here on this diagram, I prepared a visual scheme to add clarity regarding the integration flow for Panama and Costa Rica. And as I mentioned, and their integration flows are pretty much similar. And so here for visibility, I made it, and you can see here artifact systems and parties involved in this integration flow. Okay, yeah. And here I just want to show you how the processing pipeline is configured in our Dynamics 365 Finance Globalization Studio in our user interface to configure the features for electronic invoicing.
Yes, thanks, Andrey. Thanks, Cynthia. So in the end of our presentation, I wanted to remind you about the resources that we have available related to the localization for LATAM countries. So first of all, of course, the overview of the Globalization Studio, which is the set of tools and services we provide to develop and maintain localizations in general and localizations for LATAM countries specifically. We also have a complete set of documentation articles dedicated to various features and functionalities available to Latin America, both like cross-LATAM functionalities and country-specific features. So you can find this on the Learn portal. We are conducting, as I said, like the second session in the series of Tech Talks for LATAM. So I encourage you to review the first recording as well, because there was much more information provided on how to configure the core LATAM functionality, and also some information on the first 4 countries that were released by that time. Specifically for electronic invoicing, again, please review our documentation that we have on the Learn portal for electronic invoicing, both how to configure electronic invoicing formats and generation, and how to use the electronic invoicing service. And we have also a Tech Talk series dedicated specifically to electronic invoicing, which is, I highly encourage you to review, because the configuration is quite complex, and the series provides a lot of information on how to work with the service. And lastly, we have a Yammer group that is dedicated to new localizations in general. So we post various announcements in this Yammer group, and you can ask questions on the roadmap and on the new countries in this Yammer group. It's monitored by our experts. So if you have any questions, you just can post them to this Yammer group. You will be able to access these links as soon as we publish the presentation to the Dynamics 365 community page. Just also wanted to remind you about some common resources that are available. We have this Fast Track LinkedIn page. You can follow it. We publish a lot of various updates and news on this page. We publish all Tech Talk session, Tech Talks recording to our YouTube page of Dynamics 365 community, and you of course can subscribe for upcoming Tech Talk notifications. With this, I think we can switch to our Q&A. I'm quickly looking through the questions that we have currently posted. I can see that there was a lot of questions about sharing, but I hope that it was fixed and the slides were shared. There is a lot of, or a number of questions related to adoption of these functionalities, of how we work with customers and partners here. So, and also there is a question on demo data for new LATAM countries. Yes, and I will start with it. We are currently working on creating demo data for the newly released countries. We will start most likely with Chile, but then in the end, eventually, I hope we will be able to provide like legal entities, new legal entities, and standard demo data for all newly released LATAM countries. And this demo data will demonstrate how to configure cross LATAM functionalities properly and country-specific features as well. So yeah, we hope to make it available in coming months. And overall, like regarding the adoption, so yes, we are in contact with some customers and partners. We are collecting feedback from various channels, and we are trying to address the feedback and increase awareness of the localization solution in the market. And this Tech Talk session is part of these efforts. But again, if you have like questions or feedback on new LATAM localizations, I encourage you to reach out to us through the Yammer group. This would be the most direct way to provide feedback on this localization solutions. Yes, I see that there is a question about the availability of Venezuela, and my understanding, and I see Andrey has already responded to it. Yes, but my understanding also is that the question is related to electronic invoicing for Venezuela, and we don't have it in our roadmap. So per our current understanding, it's electronic invoicing is not mandatory for Venezuela. We don't have it in the plans. This may change if the regulations or requirements in Venezuela change. The next question is, does e-invoice have an extra processing cost? I don't know, Andrey, you have provided your brief answer if you want to elaborate on this a bit.
Yeah, but I answered basically. So yes, we have a billing for using of for consumption of invoicing service for number of submitted invoices, right? But I wouldn't share the prices because they may change, and basically also we have it depends on the type of subscription, like so. You just need to reach out to sales representatives of your partner for this.
Okay, thanks, Andrey.
Yeah.
The next question is, there is date for update of Chilean report. I probably don't get the full details of the question, and maybe if you could elaborate a bit, just submit some more details in the Q&A segment, and we will try to respond to this. So the question is related to update Chilean report. Next question is, LATAM has several issues. For example, you can't post multiple invoices faking slips at once. When it will be solved? That's, per my understanding, this is related to a known case for now. Because of multiple additional LATAM fields added to invoice posting that they are mandatory, they need to be populated manually before posting an invoice. It's not possible to use or to post invoices in batch or packing slip in batch. That's a known problem, and we are looking at it. There are some considerations on how this can be implemented, and some complexities or questions of how these fields could be defaulted so that it's not required for users to populate them manually, and it's possible to post invoices in batch. So we have this gap in our roadmap, in our backlog. I don't have any specific date currently for this, but I hope we will be able to resolve this eventually. Next question is Argentinian e-invoice integration being considered via EDICOM services too? Andrey, maybe you could respond to this.
Yeah. So for Argentina, we do not plan to integrate it via the authorized certification provider or PAC, like it's called PAC in Latin America. So we are planning to build a direct integration with the Argentinian tax authority.
Yes, thanks, Andrey. So yes, basically, again, the current consideration is to create an integration, to implement the electronic invoice integration for Argentina directly to authorities. Okay, the next question is, in the purchase report, it's not possible to configure multiple taxes. I'd like to know if there is a fix for this. Cintia, maybe you could look at this question and respond to it.
Yes, Evgeny. Probably there is a problem with the configuration of the lookups and the option in the lookups. Probably because it's possible to configure other taxes, but we are going to check it anyway. So please remember to configure and properly the specific parameter of the report and the lookups options.
Yes, thanks, Cynthia. So from my side, I would probably recommend to review the configuration once again because, yes, as Cynthia mentioned, it should be possible to configure multiple taxes in the report. But if you have issues with this and still are blocked, you could reach out to our support channel, and we will be able to look at this and try to help you with this. One more question is as everybody knows, MS support response time is not good enough. Is there a different channel to support these localizations? So like support team or support channel is our primary channel supporting like customers with issues or problems with their implementations or usage of our product. So yeah, the primary way to reach out to Microsoft with issues is through the support team. You can also reach out to us, as I mentioned, through our Yammer group dedicated to new localizations, and we'll see if it's possible to help there. But again, like primary and best way to get support is reaching out through our Microsoft support channel. One more question is not really related to our current scope, but it's related to Brazil, and the new tax regulations for Brazil will be available for Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations on premises. Andrey, maybe you could comment on this.
And I can answer for sure regarding the electronic invoicing part, right? And as I mentioned, we are moving to electronic reporting, and this is supported in on-premise. And that was one of the major reasons we decided not to move it further to electronic invoicing service, but maybe you need to reach out to the dedicated Yammer group for the Brazil tax reform regarding the tax engine, because if it there will come, how to say, there maybe we can have some, I don't know, restriction regarding the tax engine, but I'm not sure here.
Andrey, I can comment on this. The new tax engine, the advanced tax calculation engine that we are going to use for Brazil is available on premises as well. It's just part of the FNO solution. So there is no restriction on using it in on-premises installations. So basically, I can summarize the response that for now there is there shouldn't be any blockers on using the update for new tax regulations for Brazil and on-premises installations. All right. The next question is Dominican Republic e-invoice integration being considered via an authorized partner from the tax authority? Andrey, could you to this?
Regarding the Dominican Republic, we are going to add this country to our last mile connector with EDICOM, not a direct integration.
Yes, one more question is as following. I need to test the integration with Edicom in Chile. How can I obtain test credentials? This wasn't possible with the provider. Who is responsible for the integration, Microsoft or Edicom? Andrey, again, could you please comment on this?
Yes, but regarding testing of the integration, it's definitely the question of communications between the company and Edicom, because how to say, Microsoft has their own credentials, for testing. And also, by the way, there is a need here for a digital signature as well. And of course, we cannot provide, Microsoft cannot share these artifacts, with anyone. And that's why this is a must, that you have to reach out to Edicom and obtain the credentials from them. And also you need to provide some, as I mentioned, digital certificate, as well as in some cases test folio ranges, for example. And Microsoft doesn't have possibilities and even kind of legal rights to do it.
Okay, I don't see any other new questions in the Q&A session. So thanks everyone for attending, and I'm wishing you having a good rest of the day.